So, I've always wondered how some people who study business can make a ton of money and some people make not as much. I also wonder why parents always want their kids to become doctors, engineers, and lawyers, but especially engineers, when engineers don't even make as much as finance pros. Well, I think I figured it out, and I'm here to tell you how the world of business works from the perspective of an engineer. First, it's important to know that every business only does two things: one, make money, and two, figure out what to do with that money. Engineers mostly live within bucket number one. We design the product, we optimize the system, we make the thing work better. But there's a second bucket: capital allocation. This is, should we open a new factory? Should we buy another company? Should we shut down this division? Should we invest 100 million in this idea? That's not engineering, that is finance. Finance is all about trying to figure out if the business idea is a good idea. Will it make money? And if it's worth the money today, to invest in the hope for more money tomorrow. And how finance people decide whether or not something is a good investment or not is a lot of educated guessing, aka vibes. So, pretty much the whole business runs on vibes that operate within the guardrails and regulations of accounting and reporting. And these finance pros who predict the future the best will make the biggest bank. All right, now let's take a second and zoom out. There are basically three types of firms in the entire business world. Yes, three. That's it. First, operating firms. We're starting with this one because it's the easiest one to conceptualize. It's basically working at a company that makes and sells goods and doing stuff for that company. So, like working at McDonald's, or a chemical company, or a car manufacturer, or a tech company, or a startup. They create the product, they hire the engineers, they generate real revenue. And this is where most people work. This is where the value is physically created. Second, professional services. These are firms that provide services to operating companies. This is like consulting or investment banking, which I learned is actually not investing but matchmaking between a buyer company and a seller company. They really need to come up with a better name. Or like an accounting firm. They don't own that business, they don't run the business, they only advise the business. So basically, if a company needs help or expertise or a scapegoat, they call a professional services company to work on what they either can't or don't want to do. And third, investing firms. These firms buy a company or a piece of a company thinking that they can make it better, aka worth more, and then sell it later. That's the most simplistic way to put it. So, hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital firms all fall into this category. They're just betting that they can inject some money into the business, make it make more money, and then either have it IPO, which is like selling it to the public, or sell it to another firm at a larger amount in the future. These three types of firms are actually really important to keep in mind because they all want people with experience in the other two types of firms. For instance, professional service firms like consulting like people with operating experience because these people have an ownership mindset and know how the clients of consulting companies work so they can better advise their clients. Their clients also trust former operators because they think former operators better understand and empathize with them. Operators also have deep insights that are hard to get anywhere else except operating. I imagine consulting firms also like people with investing experience, but the finance bros almost never decide to go into consulting because that would be a pay cut. Investing firms like operators as well because they understand how their portfolio companies operate and can help with cost cutting and efficiency improvements. This is why I think there's a new type of role popping up called PE ops, which stands for private equity operations, where the PE firms install their own people into their portfolio companies to run it. This is also why VC firms like to hire former founders because they know what it's like to get their hands dirty, can vet startups, and can advise the portfolio companies if needed. And operator firms like people with investing and professional service backgrounds because it's like having an in house strategist or consultant that is way cheaper than hiring McKinsey. So, yeah, think of a company and you can throw them into any one of these three buckets. Now, remember, we want to be in the business of predicting the future, aka picking which companies will grow. So, let's talk about the life cycle of a company to explain how these firms are all connected and make money. Operating companies in the business of predicting the future are often called startups. You know what startups are, so let's move on. JK, startups are just really, really young companies, usually with amazing, innovative ideas that are trying to change the world. I think most of the startups we study at HBS are first movers, category creators, but it can actually be really advantageous to be a second mover as well because you don't have to educate the public about your new product. The market likely already exists, it just needs to be grown, and you just have to be way better than the incumbent. But these startup founders usually have great ideas and zero money. So, where do they get their money to build their ideas? Sometimes business ideas can be funded through crowdsourcing from friends, family, or something you might be familiar with is Kickstarter. But other times, they need a lot more money, like a lot more. So they might take out a loan or go to a venture capital firm to convince them to try to give them a chunk of cash. But what are venture capital firms? Think of the VC firm like Kickstarter. They are the platform or the middleman to facilitate the money collection and give it to the startup in exchange for a fraction of their business or some control over what they do with that money. So, who is the crowd that the VCs are crowdsourcing from? It's usually rich people, or pensions, or organizations with big pools of money like that. These people or groups that give VCs money are called limited partners or LPs because they mainly give money, not opinions that directly drive investment decisions, usually. The people managing the money, deciding which startups to invest in, are called general partners or GPs. So, yeah, in summary, VCs, GPs crowdsource money from LPs to invest in early stage businesses, aka startups. So, they're betting that in the future, the startups that they invest in will make it big. And if they do, then they make lots and lots of money. Because at the end of the day, they are all in the business of guessing the future. So, what if those startups are a little older and a little bigger? VCs usually don't touch those, but PE or private equity firms do. PE firms basically do the same kind of job that VCs do, but for larger companies that might be struggling to grow or be profitable. And as a side note, PE firms usually just invest in private companies. That's why it's called private equity. Anyway, PE firms usually do this thing called a leveraged buyout or an LBO. Basically, they look at the cash the company is making, trying to predict if it will continue to make that cash and how much that stream of future cash is worth. Take out a loan against that cash flow, use the cash flows to pay off the loan while the PE firm tries to make the business better, i.e., generate more cash flows. The PE firm will typically try to do this by cutting costs or raising prices or making stuff more efficient. And if everything is great, the business flourishes and everybody makes money. But yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings, mostly skepticism about PE that I don't really want to get into here. I just want to say that if I ever work for a PE firm, it will need to be a values based firm, a firm that will do no harm to the business, be in an industry that is not critical to human life, like healthcare or dentistry or real estate, and put the customer first. As you can tell, I am still salty about Joann's fabrics. Now, say those companies survive and get even bigger, and another company wants to buy it. That's when the buyer or seller would go to an investment bank. The bankers and finance pros there try to figure out how much the target company is worth and facilitate a deal with the buyer. So there's M&A and there's IPO. You probably know what an IPO is. An IPO is the event that enables you to buy a stock in a company. Basically, tiny pieces of the company, aka stock, are being sold to you, and you buy it because you believe it'll be worth more in the future. And if you're right, then you've played the future predicting game well and you can make a lot of money. Investment banks are basically the real estate agents of buying and selling businesses. And then, also like real estate agents, they take a large enough cut that it really hurts. And all these investment firms want to diversify their risks, so they usually invest in a bunch of different stuff and need a bunch of different expensive MBAs to manage all the stuff they're investing in. And this is when I realized why the ceiling for finance is much higher than the ceiling for an engineer. Us engineers, we improve systems. Finance controls where the capital goes, and capital is leverage. If I improve a product by 10%, that's great. But if someone reallocates $1 billion 10% better, that's $100 million. So small improvements at scale equals absurd money. Also, finance comp is heavily bonus based. Investors get carry, which is a percentage of the profits, and professional services billed at a very, very high rate. Like consulting can be billed at $1 million a week for a single team on a single project, which is like bonkers. Engineers aren't paid nearly that much. even though I think the work that we do is harder. So, not only is there a trade off between stability, accessibility, and reward, the upside is incredibly asymmetric. It's important to know that not everybody in finance makes crazy money, but the top end of early to mid career folk, the ceiling is much higher in finance than most operating roles. That's why the gap exists. That's why people go get MBAs to get into this top bracket, and that is how the business world works. So, if you thought this was helpful and insightful in pulling back the curtain and offering some transparency, consider liking and subscribing. Until next time, bye guys.